Ever have that experience when you notice something for the first time and then you see it everywhere? Such as you decide to buy a new car and you see RAV4s everywhere, but you never saw them before. So in a different way, that's the experience that I had when I discovered that Emily Carson wrote the book Holy Everything. I wanted to talk with her because much of what she was already on to well before I is the idea of everyday spirituality. The idea that the holy is present in everything. And so we had an opportunity to talk about her new book, and I think you're going to enjoy this conversation in episode 52 of the Everyday Spirituality podcast.
I grew up in a small town in Iowa, Dunkerton, Iowa, and went to Wartburg College, moved to Chicago for seminary, and loved it. My time at LSTC was some of the most spiritually formative years of my life, and I'm very grateful for that.
Great. What years were you at LSTC?
I was there from 2005 to 2009.
Okay.
And was a student assistant to Craig Satterley, who then became a bishop.
All right.
And loved that experience, and also worked at the Writing, Reading, Speaking Lab, doing some English language tutoring, and then my favorite job as a student employee was at the library. So I loved Chicago, and I loved that season of life. Then I headed to Region 3 for my first call.
The OTAs. For those of you listening, this is all kind of inside ELCA talk. So we have regions around the country, and Region 3 is the Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, the OTAs as we call it. Yeah.
And I'm not sure it still works this way, but at that point in your last year of seminary, all of the fourth years would come together, and we all got an envelope at the same time. And we opened the envelope together, and it said what region we were going to.
Oh.
And then we would all wait for a call from the bishop within the region that we would actually be assigned. So I got Southeastern Minnesota Synod, and that was a surprise at that time, but exciting. And my first call was in a town called Stewartville, which is about 8 miles south of Rochester, Minnesota. So I served a congregation there, Zion Lutheran Church, and they taught me how to be a pastor. And they were...
That's so true. Your first call, that is what people do. That's wonderful that you say that.
So gracious. Yeah. So gracious to me. I look back, and I hope that I was gracious and compassionate, but I think I also had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about like how to do church. And now I look back and I just think, oh, they were so patient with me and my colleague. So I was the associate, and my colleague was Byron Moline, and he too, decades of experience, but was so gracious with my new ideas and my thoughts on things. And now I look back at all that I've learned. And so it was great.
I love it. And I know that area well. I did my internship in Burr Oak, Iowa, which is just north of Decorah. So when my wife and I were dating, I would drive up through Rochester, right along that road to Minneapolis to go see her.
Oh, fantastic. My new colleague is Matt Larson, who served that congregation.
Oh, really? Okay.
Hesper and Burr Oak.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It was a two-point parish, sure.
Yeah. So he's a new Synod staff teammate.
Oh, well, good. He was there cleaning up the mess I made. I was their one and only intern. They never had one before me. They never had after me. They weren't sure they wanted to have an intern. And after they had me, they decided we don't want to do that again.
Oh, sounds memorable.
I love it.
After
so that was your first call. What next?
That was my first call. Then our bishop at the time was Bishop Steve Delzer, and he invited me to join the staff about 5 years ago as the director of communications. So I shifted from parish life to synod life. That was a very steep learning curve. I learned about what a synod is and does. I also learned about database administration, website administration. And I would say I learned to think about communication as ministry in that call, which was so valuable. It was a big shift for me from thinking about communication as a task that you do in a newsletter to communication as ministry that we're doing all the time. Like anytime we're conveying an idea, that's communication. So that call was really about how to equip congregations and leaders to communicate with intentionality.
Interesting.
So I loved it.
Yeah. What would be one thing you could share with folks listening to this in terms of, we have a lot of both lay people and pastors from congregations listen to this podcast. What would be something that you would suggest, or is a learning you had from that time that people would benefit from hearing in terms of communications?
Yeah, I would say a foundational concept is the idea that everything communicates something. So a lot of times in congregations, we put so much emphasis on the bulletin or the newsletter, and we undervalue what we're communicating interpersonally, or really anytime someone's at a microphone. And so my encouragement would be to equip council members and really all lay members and pastors to think about everything as communicating something. So be intentional about what we're trying to communicate.
Right.
And develop, make sure that the core values are coming through, not just in the newsletter or the sermon, but in especially interpersonal communication. And
so
to
the
practice.
Stories we tell, after worship during coffee hour are as much a part of our communication as the newsletter.
Yeah, and the way that we treat each other, the way that we talk to each other and engage with each other. Like even asking someone a question with intentionality communicates so much.
Helpful. Good stuff. So now, though, you're still on Synod staff. You have a new bishop, and who I've gotten to know just a little bit this fall, Regina, and you have a new role.
Yeah. So 2019 was the year of vocational openness for me. So that was my intentionality. Each morning I have these little intentions and I write them down. And so the thing I've been writing since January 1st, 2019 is sincere vocational openness. And I'm so pumped about what the Holy Spirit's been up to in our synod. So on June 1st, our synod called a new bishop. Her name is Bishop Regina Hassanelli. And so she has been putting her staff together over these months. And my new role is as an assistant to the bishop and also the director for evangelical mission, which means that I get to spend time encouraging and nurturing congregational vitality and generosity. And I love it. I can't believe how surprising this year has been. And that really, to me, seems like the nature of God to perpetually surprise us. And I have been so surprised. Yeah.
Well, indeed. And I'm sure you're doing your work well and learning a lot as you go along. And then in the midst of all of this, you published a book.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for the past 10 years, I've been writing a weekly column in a newspaper called the Rochester Bulletin. So when I was in the parish, I started that, and that came out of a blog that I used to write called Diaries of a Pastoral Fashionista. I was really into thrifting, and I had a blog about it, and the Bulletin did a feature on that blog, which then paved the way for the opportunity to write a weekly column for the paper. And the column used to be called The Lady Pastor. And then about 5 years ago, we transitioned that into the title Holy Everything. So I'm super grateful to the Rochester Bulletin. For about a decade, they've given me about 550 words a week to talk about life, spirituality, faith, church, nature, creation. Yeah. And so the book itself is a compilation of about 85 of those newspaper columns in an edited format. And then there's also a accompanying discussion guide. So each of the essays takes about 5 minutes to read. And then the hope for this book is that it is truly accessible to anybody, and that they can pick it up. You don't need to read it in sequence. You can just open it up, read a reflection, and then ponder.
Sounds like we wrote a book similar in style in terms of what you just described is similar from my own book. But a little bit before the book, though, when you were writing those columns for the newspaper, did you get any feedback along the way? Did people communicate with you? And if so, what was that like?
Yeah, and the column actually continues. So yes, people have communicated feedback. And generally it has been encouraging. People are curious. The feedback sometimes comes through the mail, the physical mail, or sometimes folks will find my email address or send the feedback through the editor who forwards it to me. And then sometimes the feedback is not as encouraging. Like,
yeah, of course.
once this has only happened once, but it was memorable. Someone anonymously clipped it out of the paper and then in red Sharpie wrote on the column, "What is this blabbering?" and then
okay.
and then mailed it to me anonymously. So, but that's pretty few and far between, and I hope that helped that person feel some peace. But in general, people are curious and interested in exploring spirituality.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I just think that's so fascinating so you continue to write that column, is that right?
I do, yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's great.
It's
that's
in the Saturday paper every week in the Rochester Post-Bulletin.
Wow, wonderful. That is just fantastic. I did that in a very small town in Wakefield, Rhode Island for probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, for maybe about 4 or 5 years. There was a congregational minister, had the column for a long time, and then he moved and handed it off to me, and I did it for a while. And I heard from people as well, the whole range. I think it was a less contentious time at that point, so I didn't get too much vitriol. But what a great way to just have a public witness, I think. And it's 500 words, and a lot of clergy could do that.
Truly. And a lot of newspapers are looking for content.
Yep.
So I would really encourage anyone, clergy or lay, if you have this voice inside that says, I want to write, start writing. Just start writing. Start a practice of writing, and then reach out to a local newspaper, or a lot of towns have monthly magazines. Folks are looking for content. So once you've developed a practice, I think it's great to be able to share it.
Yep. And you probably found you got better over time?
Yeah. And definitely, as is often the case with anything, sometimes you really get it. You get in the flow and you know it while you're writing it. And then other times you just get it done. And that's okay too. And then the Holy Spirit does what the Holy Spirit does.
Right. Yeah. So the book, Holy Everything, is a collection of 85 of them. So how did you go about choosing which ones? What was that process like?
Yeah, the publisher of the book is 9 Foot Voice, and the name of the publisher and editor is Brian Scott. So he invited me to choose about 150, and then he would take it from there. And then we were trying to look for columns that would support the book being divided into different sections, so that there would be enough for each section. And the sections are like community, joy, peace, relationships, nature. So I will say, like, the process of putting it together was kind of like looking at a scrapbook for me, because it's the last 10 years of ministry, which is so fun to see what God has been up to and what I've been learning and all the things people have taught me in these 10 years. So it's fun.
Yeah. Any particular 1, 2, or 3 that stand out for you?
There's one in here about anniversaries of loss. And I was so grateful for the opportunity to include that one in the newspaper, to write that for the paper. And that was one that I definitely got a lot of feedback on. And it's about how to be really graceful with ourselves around anniversaries of loss, and how to make space for them in our lives. And another one that sticks out to me, I used to live out in the country. I rented a house, and there was this pheasant that showed up in my yard, and I named her Lady, and she showed up multiple times, and I tried to train her, and there's a column. It did not work. You cannot train a pheasant with baby carrots.
Right.
But it's funny. I think. I hope.
Yeah. Well, and so those two examples, I think, are illustrative of the title. Because on the one hand, you've got anniversaries of loss, which are deeply profound and personal things. But on the other hand, you've got this everyday, this trivial almost
right.
encounter with a pheasant.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
say something about the idea of holy everything. What are you driving at with that particular title?
What I am aspiring to drive at there is the idea that God is everywhere and within everything. And that to develop spiritual practices, to have a sense of spirituality, does not require one to like go sit in a specific kind of space or worship in a particular kind of way, but it begins with openness, like just a willingness and a curiosity about the universe. And so that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's really resonating in the culture, because clearly you and I are not the only two that have tapped on this idea. But I think, and there's a graciousness in that, because my experience with some spiritual disciplines or the teachings of them is, boy, I just leave feeling like, yeah, I know I should do that, but it doesn't work for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. It can feel, I think people carry a lot of curiosity about spirituality, but also sometimes people are carrying like shame that they have made it to this point in their life and they're not really sure what they think or believe about God or church. And so my hope with the book, and I know for you with your book too, is to invite people to be gracious with themselves and to know that at any point on the journey, we can practice this kind of openness.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's never too late. Yeah.
No, it's never too late. And there are multiple ways to enter into this. There's not just one or two. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exciting. It's great. Well, the book is charming, and it's been a wonderful, because you sent me a digital version, and I've been able to do as you just described, is kind of look at the table of contents, go, let's go there today, and let's go there. And that's the columns, the articles are very easy to read, accessible, and enter into. And yet my experience is they have a real depth and profundity to them. And so I appreciate that aspect of it.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. And so you're enjoying also, the book has been out for what now, like half a year, 6 months, something like that?
Yeah, the book launches in July, and it has been so meaningful to connect with readers. The initial launch party was my friends and family,
right,
for whom I'm so grateful for their encouragement. And now, over these months, the ripples continue, and it's fun to hear from people who I have no connection to, who have gotten it through Amazon or a friend sent it to them. And it gives me new ideas for how to use the book or how to invite people to use the book. The discussion guide really came out as feedback from readers who wanted to use it in their small group. Mm-hmm. And so, so some congregations are using it. Like there's a Mom's Morning Out group here in Rochester that's using it once a week. And that is so cool to hear how people are using it.
Yeah, that's great too. And I think because of the length of each piece, so mothers are very busy and fathers are too, but in particular, that just example you gave, it's something, you can have a morning out, and you could read it the night before or whatever. It's not like you're going to get behind on a 50-page chapter or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I have a friend who keeps it in her car. So at pickup time, when she has an extra, often 5 minutes, that's what she does. So pretty cool.
Perfect. Yeah. Kind of the bridge somewhere between a devotional book and a book that you can read from cover to cover and work your way through.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Well, that's great. Well, it's a great book, and people can find out more at holyeverything.com. And where, you've got all the links to the various places that one can buy it. And I see right now, at least here we're recording this on December, what is this, the 12th, you've got a sale on it, so people can pick it up for a little less than they would normally pay it.
Yes, Christmas special. And if folks would like it personalized for a friend or family member, they can just shoot me an email and I'd be glad to do that.
All right. Okay. You're not going to charge for the autograph, or...
Free. Christmas special.
All right. Well, thanks, Emily, and best of luck with the book and all that you're doing. It sounds like exciting times.
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity.